Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And hello to you too. Welcome to Cinema Spotlight with
Jake Dufton. I am a filmmaker and musician specializing in short film.
and Reuben Morris-Dyer, a film and TV critic with opinions heard across the BBC. This is your regular roundup of all of the latest films and re-releases hitting screens this week.
Every episode will be celebrating a different independent London cinema, giving you the lowdown on all the food, facilities, and overall experience.
This week, we're going to be adventuring through darkest Peru with the third installment in the Paddington franchise. That's right, it's Paddington in Peru.
And Merry Christmas. But oh no, Santa has been kidnapped, and only The Rock and Chris Evans can save the day in Red One.
Next up, we'll be flying high with Andrea Arnold with her new film, Bird.
And are you feeling happy? Bring down your favorite Lego sets to the cinema and watch Piece by Piece, the documentary about musician and producer Pharrell Williams. We are also going to be interviewing independent and up-and-coming filmmaker Emma Koch about her amazing short film, Mia.
This week, we watched Paddington in Peru at the fantastic Ealing Project here in Ealing. Let me tell you more about it. Off the corner of Ealing Broadway on High Street, this former nightclub spot has become home to the Ealing Project. This 3-screen, 260-seat cinema caters to a wide variety of audiences, with the biggest blockbusters and art house treasures, as well as being host to many annual film festivals, and its new Polish film club.
As well as being a go-to spot for seeing the latest releases, the Ealing Project is also a community centre with weekly events including Monday open mic nights, Wednesday live drawing classes, Thursday after-school youth clubs, and Naomi's sewing club.
We had a go at the pool.
We don't need to say who won.
And if you're looking for a bite to eat, you can grab a box of freshly popped popcorn, a slice of Detroit-style pizza at Salve's Slice before washing it all down with a hot coffee. Or, if you're feeling cheeky, a Camden beer.
So with that, we took our comfy seats and strapped ourselves in for Paddington in Peru.
First up, we have Paddington in Peru, the third film in the Paddington franchise, which frankly I think faces a mammoth task because Paddington 2 is widely regarded as one of the finest films of the last decade. Now, this sees the Brown family reunite to rescue Aunt Lucy after she goes missing from her home for retired bears, and that means travelling back to Paddington's homeland. Now, I really enjoyed this film, but I'm fascinated to get sort of into the weeds on this with you. But first, tell us a little bit about Cinema Spotlight.
Well, hello, Reuben. So happy to be here.
Indeed.
What a beautiful red carpet. It's not a carpet, it's a
festive.
curtain. It's very festive, which is good for a film later on. This is Cinema Spotlight. This is our sort of back to basics way of doing reviews for film screenings. So Cinema Spotlight is our way of just having a lovely talk about film.
Exactly.
And that's great. And, you know, this is our pilot episode, so it's very rough and ready. We're giving you these raw opinions, you know, with our unironed curtain, but it's a beautiful shade of red. So, yeah, I'm so excited. I'm excited to be here and to talk about this roster of films, which will get a cascading level of emotion from myself. Paddington 3.
Yeah, that's
Paddington 3.
It's an emotional journey, or is it?
Or is it? That's the thing. Now, Paddington 3 is absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. And that's a fine with a capital F, I think. But that's not what you really want, especially because from your opener, you said about Paddington 2, which is one of the finest films. One of the finest British films ever made. I
totally is.
As most third installments, or when an installment is, you have to find a new idea, you know, you have to send your characters out of the comfort zone.
Yes.
So we're out of London, we're in Peru. And so with that comes some advantages and some major disadvantages for me personally. So the film is very competent. It's got jokes, it's got familiar faces, some unfamiliar faces who are with Emily Mortimer, who's replacing Sally Hawkins.
That's right.
Which I think is, she doesn't quite fit in.
I do agree.
Because you've got Hugh Bonneville doing his usual stick, which is amazing. It's really...
Gotta love Hugh.
He works really well in this franchise. And you've got some very returning characters, but only in the beginning, very beginning. And then you've got Antonio Banderas, a 90s heartthrob who was famous for being a very attractive, cavalier, very go-to celebrity in the 90s and early 2000s, playing a villain obsessed with finding something that could lead to greater wealth for a better life. Yes. Now, does that sound familiar? And this is the thing that I found when I watched Paddington 2. You're missing the British quotes.
That's exactly it, isn't it? I think that when you look at Paddington 3, it is much more of a generic children's film, and that is completely fine. I completely agree with you. It is a good film, but it is not a great film. I laughed consistently. I felt ever so slightly emotional towards the end.
Oh, definitely.
But overall, it's more of a straightforward, nice family film.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have the magic, and it doesn't have, as you mentioned, the heart of those first two films. It does touch on kind of these aspects of family, and it is conscious of the fact that Paddington is an immigrant. But I actually think that particularly Paddington 2 has like a lot of deep thematic exploration around identity and around adoption. And I just didn't think that this was particularly deep in any way. It's still fun. Paddington's still adorable. It was nice to be in Peru and to see, okay, this is Aunt Lucy, because we actually haven't seen that much of her. She's briefly in the first film. But I would say that my fears about this going in were unfortunately correct.
I went home after watching that film and I had to find out what was missing.
Yeah.
Because it felt like something was missing. There were moments where I was like falling around in hilarity. It was very funny at times. And I think my highlight, as always in most films, the highlight is Olivia Colman.
I knew you were going to say that.
Olivia Colman is, and you know, this franchise, they have this obsession with nuns. The best joke, I think, came from something to do with her character. I won't give it away, but something to do with her character. But then I went back.
And the song, the sing and dance sequence that she has also, I think, is really, really
perfect.
Fun with a little Sound of Music pastiche.
Absolutely brilliant. She can't play the guitar for toffee, but that's part of the charm. It has that naffness with such sincerity that Paddington isn't naff at all. It's really sincere, and that's what makes it so lovable.
Really, at the end of the day, you look at Paddington 3 and you say, it's nice, it's lovely. You should absolutely go and watch it. You should take your family. You should go on your own. You know, it's a really nice film. You will have a nice time. But unfortunately, we have to view it in the context of it being the third film. And it is just the case that the first two are absolutely fantastic. So it is the worst film in the Paddington franchise. But that isn't really to say that it's bad, because it's not.
It's not a bad film.
It just has such strong competition.
Absolutely. I would recommend the film to a family audience. I wouldn't really go further. I think people want to see it. Yeah, it's a good time. If you want that really unique feel that you got from the first two, you probably won't experience it. You might be a little disappointed. I feel like, however, there is a blend that could be made in Wonka 2, because Wonka was missing similar elements, in my opinion.
That's interesting. Well,
and we're not talking about Wonka, but I feel that Wonka had more of what this film needed, but also this film had some of what maybe Wonka needed, and it might need going forward with both those films. And Paddington 4 is just a little bit more of that magic sprinkled back in, as you said. Next, we move on to Red One. Ho, ho, ho! Or should I say, oh, no, no. Red One follows The Rock and Johnny Storm as they try and save J. Jonah Jameson, playing a very uninspired Santa Claus, as he's kidnapped by an evil Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Lucy Liu is also there sometimes. Directed by Jake Kasdan, this is a Christmas action and adventure film, or so they tell me. Reuben, what did you think?
Yes, I mean, I really can't emphasize just how boring I found this film. I absolutely couldn't spend a second longer in the cinema than I had to. I was raring to get out of there from about 25 minutes in. Honestly, I think this is the worst festive film I've ever seen. I really, really did not enjoy it. I thought that the performances that we got from The Rock and Chris Evans were unbelievably bored. They just seemed like they didn't want to be there. They were making some money, and I hope that they had a great time and they used that money to make something fantastic. But I really just thought it was incredibly uninspired. I really like the two Jumanji films that Jake Kasdan has most recently made. I think they're really good, and I think The Rock is really funny in them. So I actually hoped when I went into this that, okay, this is going to be a bit of a nice, pleasant surprise. The first Jumanji I was very, skeptical about going in, and I was delighted to find out it's really good fun. This is just a slog. It is completely unintelligible from a plot perspective. I can't really tell you a lot of why things happen. And I just thought that the whole mood of it was shockingly straight. Like, it's very po-faced, it's very serious. This is a film in which Dwayne Johnson plays an elf, but at no point is the fact that Dwayne Johnson is playing an elf played as a joke. Like, it's really strange. I'm sure that this could have been a great film. I can almost imagine a kind of 80s, 90s version starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is really goofy and really fun. But this just takes itself astonishingly seriously for a film that features, a giant polar bear wearing a big uniform, punching people in the face. It's really, really baffling that this film exists.
Yes, I would even border on I was kind of very disturbed by this film.
Yeah.
I'm very disturbed. It had no magic. No sparkle. I'm wearing my Christmas jumper representing Jerry Anderson, which I love desperately. Merry Christmas. I know it's November. Don't shoot me in the comments. But this film, it was when we had the roster of films,
yes.
It was the first one I saw, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to be so negative at the throughout this interview.
We hate to be negative,
We
obviously, you work in the film industry and you know how hard it is to make a really good film.
Oh, absolutely.
And no one goes into a project like this planning to make something that is as entertaining as this is. But it is remarkable, I think, how much this falls apart.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we start and we're introduced to Chris Evans, who I think is a very enjoyable actor to watch. But it seems to me, as soon as he stopped playing Captain America, he's gone back to the parts he played before that era in his life. He's just playing the attractive loser, the attractive, too cool for school. He's really at the bottom of the barrel. He's a really nasty person in the sense that he literally steals candy from a baby in the opening scene of this film. It's very cliche, but not in a fun way. It presents the mythos as Father Christmas as films like Arthur Christmas does, or the Santa Claus, as this big bureaucratic thing that has this magic underneath it, and that's what you need to find because it's been so, as you said, become so serious. It's like a very militarized job. I like there are outrageously bad Christmas movies, that the Hallmark Christmas movies, the Netflix owned ones, but they have more magic than this.
Completely.
Because the aesthetic's better. I think this movie falls into what Marvel has slightly become, which is the Shark Boy and Lava Girlification of action movies. Okay. Everything is just filmed on a green screen. And I like Shark Boy and Lava Girl because that has some childlike whimsy that is missing from this film.
We needed whimsy.
We needed it. The main character has that typical deadbeat dad archetype that you see in these films. I have a big gripe.
Okay.
With a huge gripe, which is J.K. Simmons is a fabulous actor.
I love him.
And I thought that was going to be my highlight of this film. If I don't like anything else, I'll love his Father Christmas.
Yeah.
Because what a character to have. He is J. Jonah Jameson. He is bigger than life. He can be a marvelous Santa. Boring, swole, Jim Bro Santa is not what I want to see. And I was like, okay, his aesthetics don't worry me at all, but it's just, there is no, he's so, and he spends most of the film sat down.
He does. But as you say, he is this super, super fit Santa. And when we see him in the Santa costume, it's like, it's made of leather and it's all kind of a dull red. And in many ways, I think that encapsulates what this film has done, which is it's taken a magical idea and it's dulled it down, and it's forced it into a realm of reality, and it's treated it with a level of seriousness that frankly is completely uninteresting. And it means that when you have these big magical moments, they just don't feel like something you can emotionally invest in, because you don't buy into the world. I certainly didn't. And I don't know how you felt about the sort of big emotional arc that is at the center of the film, but I didn't believe it at all, and I thought that it was just trying to get these unearned emotional beats in there, because that's what the plot is. You know, you can feel the mechanics of the machine operating to get from point A to point B, and it's just completely soulless. And you mentioned a brand earlier. This really did feel like a branding exercise to me. This felt like The Rock getting his brand out there, Chris Evans getting his brand out there. You know, Jake Kasdan making a film which is going to make an awful lot of money. You know, I think this is doing well at the box office, and I'm sure he'll go on to make bigger and much better things. But yeah, you know, it just really struck me as being, in quite a depressing existential way, a piece of capitalist machinery. And that's grim at Christmas.
I also heard that it was supposed to be a direct-to-streaming release, but then was delayed. And it feels like that. It feels as throwaway as some direct-to-streaming things, because it doesn't have any real nuance of actual character, actual Christmas.
No.
I feel like there are some tiny spots of light. If I'm being
Tell
positive,
me. Yeah, let's talk about the positives for a moment.
the creature design.
This is exactly what I said as the credits rolled.
This is the best thing, because
Brilliant.
a character comes in that you can guess who it is if you know Christmas. The character of Krampus comes in. And the way that these creatures are designed, you think there are a lot of CGI characters in this. As I said, with everything's on a green screen, everything's CGI, except we get this beautiful moment where we see this magical makeup work.
It's brilliant.
The way that Krampus looks is very good. Different from the very famous horror movie that came out.
Absolutely.
Which is good. I'm glad they went that way. But then there's loads of characters in that have amazing makeup.
It's a we should say a sort of Krampus in his lair, his minions sort of scene. So you've got loads of extras with all of this fantastic prosthetic.
A bit like the canteen scene in Star Wars. It's to show that we have aliens in that film, but this one is like, we have this other thing, which I think is what would have been great about this film, is if they lent into the more multifaceted approach to Christmas. Like they just glance it, but because it's through the eyes of these quipping, really annoying, really insincere, really just unwatchable, boring.
It was so boring.
Tiresome performances. You're just like, well, imagine if you had someone with a bit more glee. Like these adults are like, I fear nothing. I'm badass. I kick ass. I can beat up snowmen. I can do this. I'm so cool. Christmas really isn't about being cool.
The film at times you can't really tell what's going on, because it's just kind of streaks of pixels, and it's horrible. It reminded me, of the worst moments of Marvel films, where you just think, okay, was any human at any point on set for this? Because there are just extended sequences that are basically animated. And I also really was struck by just how dour the color palette is. My goodness, like, this is a Christmas film, people. Why is it grey? Everything is grey. And when we do have colors, like, they don't even look good. It's baffling to me that this supposedly full of fun and festive cheer film is this dour. And you know what? They needed more silly jokes. Like, there is one point where Dwayne Johnson punches someone and says Merry Christmas. And that, for me, I was like, yes, that's the tone that we want in this film. That's what I want. Imagine if Arnie had punched on and then said Merry Christmas. You'd be punching the air. Like, that's wonderful.
I'll save the audience by not doing my Arnold Schwarzenegger impression. But I completely agree. It's this film should have been more Santa Claus is coming to town, but it was more in the bleak midwinter.
That's exactly it.
It's so, you're so on the nose with it, and you leave it and you don't feel like, and I felt like, gosh, it's still November. Now guys, we have something a little special for you. Our first interview with an independent filmmaker, Emma Koch,
a young and inspiring filmmaker, originally from Belgium and a very personal and dear friend of mine. The film Mia is the story of a young girl in occupied Belgium as a German soldier has to come and live in her home with her aunt. It's an amazing story, and here she is to talk a little bit about it.
This idea was in my head for like a long time because of stories that I had from my grandparents and my parents, who obviously got it from their parents.
Dus dat is die woning van vrouw Louise Hofkens. Ieder huishoud wurde einem unserer Jungs zugewiesen.
There's a few scenes that happen in real life, and what I did was just start with like asking my mom to retell their stories. Then I did just tons and tons of research what the role of women was during the war and how they fought.
And if you guys want to check out the extended interview, please go to our YouTube channel where you can watch it in full. And if you want to check out the short film yourself, the link is in the description.
And now we come on to Bird, the new film by Andrea Arnold, the fantastic director of Fish Tank. She made Cow and, of course, American Honey. Now, I've been a fan of her films for a long time, and I really enjoyed this as well. It basically follows a 12-year-old girl and the difficult relationship that she has with her father, played by Barry Keoghan, her mother, and also a very strange man who appears in her town trying to find out if it is in fact where he comes from. He's got this kind of mysterious past, and a strange bond forms between them. The film is very dreamlike. It has a very sort of Bildungsroman, coming of age bent to it, and it's really intriguing, I think. I wonder what you thought, because as much as I really enjoyed it, I don't think it will be for everyone.
Now, this film, when I went to see it, the cinema kind of broke. So I saw the opening 15 minutes 3 times.
Wonderful.
The third time was the charm, as you'd expect. But I was that experience helped a little bit, which seems strange, because I watched the first 15 minutes twice, and it's quite a guttural first 15.
Yes.
And it's hard to watch at times.
Yeah. It's safe to say that the film deals with themes of domestic abuse in a very full-on way.
Yes, it can be quite extreme at moments. And so the first 2 times I saw the opening, I was like, where is this going to go? I have no idea, and I'm not sure where it's going to lead. Yeah. This sort of hyper-realistic deep dive into British poverty. Yeah. It might be a great film, but is it going to be an enjoyable watch? And, these films are necessary, absolutely necessary to capture a side of life that is so often overlooked. But I was pleasantly surprised with where it did go, because it does deal with those deep and dark corners of this world.
And unflinchingly too. I was impressed. I thought it was responsible in the way that it dealt with those issues.
Absolutely. It also, it's got a bleakness, an earned bleakness, unlike the previous film we talked about. But it really does have that slight essence of whimsy, and then further along it sort of grows this mysteriousness. It grows into it, and the performances by the young stars are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I'm not sure how I feel about this film. I watched it last night, and I watched the full film last night, and I came back home and I was just thinking about it constantly. Because there are moments that are very odd in the film. But odd in a way that I expected. I'm not sure if you expected them as well. I'm not going to spoil anything here, because if you want to go see the film, if you feel like you're able to go see something that deals with these extremely difficult topics, I'd recommend it highly. I know that's rushing the review a little bit to tell you what I think.
I agree.
I'd recommend it, and I'd love for other people to tell me their opinions.
I completely agree. I think it's a real conversation starter in many ways. And actually, I know what you're referring to when you talk about some of the odd events that happen. Yeah. I didn't see those coming at all. And what I absolutely loved about it is it is a coming of age story. And it's focusing on this 12-year-old girl, as I said, but it's also a coming of age story for her father. It's a coming of age story for her brother. It's a coming of age story for her many siblings who live with her birth mother. And it's also a coming of age story for this very strange wanderer named Bird. And I just loved the way that we get the character development across the board, all happening in tandem, and it's all intertwined. And I think that Andrea Arnold is such an exceptional director that she's able to tell these stories in a very, very elegant and unshowy way. You know, it's not a film that is saying, wow, look at me, aren't I impressive? It is just dedicated to documenting these people's lives. And I completely believed in every single character.
No, I agree. I agree that it is so raw in its presentation. And the main character, Bailey, is 12 years old. Yeah. And I watched that film, and that fact is mentioned early on. So you are set, you will understand the pains she has to go through. Yeah. The pain of becoming a teenage woman. The pain of being old beyond your years.
Yes.
I was nowhere near as mature of a person at that age. No one should be. No one should be, but this person has been put in that place where they have to, as one of the eldest especially amongst her siblings, her younger siblings, and trying to identify it. It's a great example of identity.
Completely.
Really brilliant, because she doesn't really know. She doesn't really know. And at the end, she kind of has an understanding, or is on the way to understand.
Yes.
And that's not a big spoiler, because these films, you know, coming of age films have that purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
They are further along in their development. But it's just so beautifully done. And I must say that I'm not the hugest Barry Keoghan fan.
Wow, okay.
And that I'm really throwing myself under the bus. All the fans of Sabrina Carpenter, please do not kill me. But the thing is, because my issue with
he's very
Barry,
blessed.
he is a wonderful performer, but he tends to fall back on his go-to strange, creepy.
I don't agree with it.
You cannot agree with me, but maybe because I have such a sour taste in my mouth after Saltburn, which again I don't want to talk about another film here. Now that film is another film that people went in, and I understand why people liked it, and I understand why people like me were not so fond of it. And the same with this film. I could understand if people went in and like, what is this film about? But Barry Keoghan really surprised me in a way that maybe I need to watch more of his performances, because I have enjoyed them, but then the more they stack up, the more his exposure to me as an audience member, I was like, oh, I want to see him do something a little different. Okay. And that's mainly it, like just sort of vary that approach, because he is so talented and such an interest and fills the screen.
Yeah.
And really does, and has that power. And he comes in this film, and the very opening sequences, I've seen it so many times now. I've seen his arrival. And he's covered in these outrageous tattoos, and he's shirtless, and he's big old, here's the same Barry.
Music blaring,
him screaming, you know, he's wild, and he leans into his sort of Irish accent even more. And it's like, okay, I'm in for one of those wild and out there Barry Keoghan performances, and I loved him in Killing of a Sacred Deer, and Banshees is really good, and then Saltburn was the real rotten egg in the mix. However, I give absolutely, the performance develops, especially, and I'm not going to spoil it, but as that performance grows, and what I wanted to see in the film and was rewarded with, with these echoes and slight moments of hope.
Yes.
Really beautiful.
It's a hopeful film. I think we've emphasised that at times it's bleak, but fundamentally its message is one of hope.
And the character of Bird is so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that performance was really exceptional. He's this, you know, fascinatingly unknowable man. Just the way that sometimes you see him smiling, right, and you think, you're trying to work out what his thought process is, what's going on, and I it was a fascinating enigma. And as you say, brilliantly played as well.
Maybe the one drawback I have on the film is that some people are just so irredeemable that was the only thing that took me out, that they were so dark. And I know that these people exist, but that's only my very small gripe, because, as I said, there are other characters who really do come through. They really do.
I think you're absolutely right. And for me, the film is so much about self-definition, because Bailey, our protagonist, she is somebody who is trying to define herself at a point of change in her life. She's started to go through puberty, but she's also starting to kind of exist as a person independent of her family or even of her friends. And, you know, there's this recurring motif of her filming things on her phone and then projecting them on her wall. And it's almost like through the power of creation, through the power of filming things, like she is working out who she is. And I think we also see that with her father, who sort of feels like the key to him working out who he is in his life is by getting married, right? And it's interesting to me how throughout this film, its message in many ways, I think, is that it's through our actions that we discover who we really are. Bird wants to know who his family are, where he comes from, because he feels that that will give him this concrete sense of identity. And I thought that was really fascinating and yet really well explored across the board. And I was really intrigued as well, kind of by the ending. I personally loved the conclusion of the film. I thought was really that was a really positive and an upbeat ending, actually, that leaves you thinking, okay, you know, everyone is redeemable, but maybe it sounds like for you there is a sense that some people
I
can't.
mostly agree. There's a few moments where I'd have that it wasn't as nuanced because it didn't need to be, because they needed that in the film. There's a sort of villainous character.
Yes,
but I use that term villainous not in the twirling mustache, mwahaha sense, but in the sense of real evils of this world. Nothing is fake. These things do happen and these people do exist. And it has to be an obstacle that these characters overcome, all the obstacles, and to show the development of Bailey, the development of Bird, and then through indirect, the development of Bug, Barry Keoghan's character. Indeed. And, you know, it's and the ending is brilliant.
Yeah.
And not just the sort of climactic ending, but the actual ending, the sort of the coming together of spirits and souls, the sort of
in music as well.
In music, and that is something I really think this film masterfully does in its soundtrack, which it's not littered with songs.
No,
it's very purposeful, but also the score by Burial
is phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
It captures a sense of ache. I think ache for community.
It's so yearning and so, but also appropriate for the culture, appropriate for the dire straits that they're in, appropriate for this level of pain.
Yeah.
It just seems very, because it's music that these characters would listen to.
Yeah.
It has ties to the music that they are listening to, and the way that Barry Keoghan's character is represented quite a lot through the music he performs and he listens to, and also the way that they move together and dance and talk together as a community is through these little snippets of music. And this music that goes through has this airy quality, and you know, fitting of
and it feels evocative of the landscape as well. I think
brilliant.
Nature is such a big part of the film.
Absolutely, nature and brutalism. And they come together, that even the most brutal, the opening shots and the shots of the apartment, which is absolutely decorated in graffiti, is quite mesmerizing. So the final film we're going to talk about today is Piece by Piece, a documentary detailing the life of Pharrell Williams. However, through the medium of Lego, a phrase coined by Reuben here, it's been Legoified, a really interesting, dynamic, visual documentary that I'm really excited to discuss with you. So, Reuben, go ahead, tell me what you thought.
Yeah, so I have to say, I was slightly baffled going in by the decision to have it in Lego form. You know, I thought, well, obviously he doesn't really have anything to do with Lego. Why would this be the way that we tell this story? But actually, it really made sense to me, because by rendering his life story in Lego, it gives you a really interesting way of kind of going off into flights of fantasy, which kind of illuminate the whole artistic process in many ways. And you get the representation of music as like a tactile physical form in a way that I thought was really interesting, particularly when he was talking about building beats, and he's literally crafting them out of blocks. That was really interesting. And also on a kind of, you know, broader, more more thematic level, the film is really interested in how the world is essentially consisting of billions of individuals working together. And the kind of message of the film is a bit like, but it's a hopeful one, which is that if we work together, we can create something great and we can create something that is good. And so actually the Lego brick formation suddenly made a lot of sense to me, because it's like, okay, so you're literally building these things brick by brick, like we're all Lego in that sense. So honestly, I was really charmed by this. I was really pleasantly surprised. It is fundamentally quite a straightforward documentary, but I think you get so much mileage out of that, out of that medium and out of that framing device. That, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I sort of sensed a reason why he would go that way. I can understand why he went through the Lego approach. I think Lego is such an iconic piece of just it's everyone's got Lego.
Yeah.
Whoever you are, it spans across generation, it spans across age. It has such a unique device that you have the ability to create. It's so designed for the creative mind.
Fantastic. Yeah.
You have to build your own adventures, even if you use sets that are already labeled or branded. It doesn't matter. You can just disassemble and do whatever you want. And I think you're right. That really lends itself to someone as artistically prominent as Pharrell Williams. I think it's so interesting because it deals with synesthesia.
Yes.
Which is a big thing that is mentioned quite early on in the film. The idea that you experience music through sound, but then it visualizes itself in colors and just other emotional responses that not everyone would feel. I studied music initially. That was my undergraduate degree, and I had friends who also had synesthesia. And when they explained it to me, it's quite hard to understand, because you could say that a person could feel a certain color, or a note or a piece of music could feel a certain way. And this demonstration of it was probably a really necessary way to understand, because it is so visual. It's beautiful. It's beautifully animated.
It's a really impressive animation. And actually, I thought, okay, am I going to be able to take this sort of... It's a strange mix of very realistic and naturalistic sound combined with this sort of slightly fancy and obviously Lego, form world. But I really was surprised by how much I got on board with it, and it wasn't distracting. And fundamentally, I thought that actually he's got a really interesting life story. I didn't know particularly much about him. I was surprised by how much of his music I knew.
Well, that's the thing. It's a documentary something that you really want from documentary is you want no holes barred. You want complete access to this person's life.
Yeah.
And to a point, we get that in this, with how many people are represented through Lego. And they're all really, really accurately done. Which, from a design point of view, you can instantly tell who's who. You can tell...
Yeah, absolutely.
You can tell Jay-Z, you can tell, Gwen Stefani and Justin Timberlake and Snoop Dogg is so well portrayed in the film. And it's really interesting. It really is interesting from that point of view. And you're right, he does have a really interesting life story, coming from humble upbringings, but seemingly friends with all the future superstars.
It's incredible to think that all of these, they all went to school together.
In Virginia Beach. And it's exciting to see what they have to say about him, because he was so much of a producer for most of his early career, helping people create this music that we all know, that has been in the zeitgeist for such a long time. And you are reminded how, maybe this is why the documentary exists. However,
I'm glad that you said however. I have some reservations also.
I really do, because I come back to the best thing about the movie is also the drawback.
Okay. Yes.
Which is that it's a Lego film. Yeah. It's like the Lego movie, Lego Batman movie. These movies are two films I truly love that have great emotional stories, but are aimed towards children.
Okay.
However, a grown-up audience can enjoy them.
Yeah.
But this is a documentary about a musician.
Yeah.
And musicians, obviously, and it does go into some of the difficulties he experienced in life. However, I felt very disconnected from him as a person. It felt very much like he's one of the producers.
Yeah.
He's done it in this style that makes everything Lego washed.
Yeah.
Everything's colorful,
Yeah.
and everything is bright, and even, you know, depression and sort of difficulties in relationships and even race
Yeah.
is presented through this Lego filter,
Mhm.
which instantly, in my opinion, it numbs it and it takes away the sharp edges.
I agree.
Literally.
I do very much concur with you there. And I thought you mentioned the design of the figures and how recognizable they were. I thought there was a slight issue with sometimes being able to connect to the emotions, because actually, you know, we've seen videos of Pharrell Williams. He's got the most expressive face. Like, you can read a lot in his face, and I think you actually lose that in Lego form, and it does create something of an emotional distance. And because he is, as you mentioned, you know, a producer on the film, and he's heavily involved with the creation of the finished movie, I did get the sense that this was a little bit stage managed. You know, it didn't feel necessarily as explorative of his true character as it could have done. You know, it was almost a little bit too easy on him. And that's not to say I think it needs to be scandalous and have dark secrets. I think it's strange, for example, that they don't talk about the controversy around blurred lines. You know, we hear that song, we play that song, we don't talk about any of the implications of that song going out into the world.
I'm so surprised that it even makes an appearance. But that song is to a montage of excess, and it doesn't have the context of what the song was written in. It doesn't have the lawsuit which came into the place about plagiarism, but it doesn't show the impact of that on him as a creative. I also, you had this thing about him collecting and building beats, which is such a great representation of how visually you can sort of show a younger audience, oh, this is how I want to explain what I do. However, I don't really feel that explanation.
Okay,
they instantly come in with this sense of skill. They do talk a lot about his younger years and how he picked up a drum kit and then listened to music and then eventually but then made the beat for some of the most famous songs you've ever heard. Instantly. Like most major biopics of musicians, it skims across a person's creative endeavors.
It's very hard to put that on screen, though, I think. And I did appreciate the effort that this film made in actually showing, okay, there is just a period where they're just jamming, you know, and they're talking about the fact that, you know, he's just going over to his friend's house and they're just experimenting with music, and they're learning how to use their instruments. And I think you were talking about the purpose of the film, like, what's this film for? I think, and this ties into the Lego element, it is so much about inspiring the next generation. You know, when I watched this, I really did think, gosh, if I was 8 years old, I would watch this and I would feel so inspired and I would feel so empowered to actually pursue my creative dreams. Because this is a man who comes from an area with no access to the music industry, and through grit and persistence and talent and skill and working with other people, he is able to become this huge, you know, monumentally successful figure. And I thought that was really lovely. I thought it was inspiring. I felt inspired, you know. I'm 25. I found it inspiring, you know, to pursue your creative ambitions. So, you know, that did really work for me. But it is interesting that at times you do have this sense of, okay, it sort of seems too easy almost. It seems smoothed over.
Yeah, I think that was probably my issue, because you do make a good point. They do jam, which is always what you need. You know, the best thing about the Get Back documentary, and I've watched that the whole 900 hours 3 or 4 times, because it's so, you just like watching those people jam, and you like watching them talk about music, you like watching them connect with these people, and he has so many high profile friends who seem to hold him on a pedestal as a good person in their lives, not just the producer who got them to be successful. But you know, there's a scene where Pusha T is talking about how he was down on his luck, and Pharrell came and sort of lifted him up and brought him out from, Pusha T had lost his record deal, and Pharrell wanted to put him back on top because he recognized in his friend talent. And that's a wonderful, beautiful thing, and really nicely captured in this, in the Lego form that it was. And so he has all these people, but it may have been nice to have a more realistic conversation. Like you said, we're lacking some of the emotional connection. We have the right artistic visual language to demonstrate the creativity, and that's brilliant. But you are right.
it's thin on the emotions.
It's
It really is.
packaged down. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's packaged down to be a a family friendly, child friendly Lego movie, sized biopic. You do sacrifice something in getting to that. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just, because that was the best thing about it. The family friendliness had the best joke in the film. It's when they go and visit Snoop Dogg and they want to avoid talking about any drug use. A spoiler but it's in the trailer, I think.
Yeah.
And they use PG spray to create this illusion of mist in Snoop Dogg's studio. I think that's amazing, and that adds a level of comedy because it's very self-aware. And all these Lego movies are really self-aware, and that really helps with just the translation of that medium to an audience. I have one very specific gripe as a musician. I think, well, you can't really accurately show the extreme level of musicianship this man has because you're suffering through the fact that the guitars are Lego. They don't have fingers. They can't show on the keyboard their skill. You just have to assume that they're super talented. And it works, but I think for musicians, you also do want to have a look and see, I just want to watch them be as talented as they are. And it won't be everyone's gripe with the film. They'll enjoy it for what it's presenting to be.
I didn't necessarily have a problem with that, but I completely can see it.
Hopefully people understand where I'm coming from with that. And again, it's not about the snare drum. It's more about, then it just sort of reacts with everything. That was the first time I realized, I'm not going to see that. I'm not actually going to see them perform. I'm going to see visions of them through that filter and how they perform. And I think that separated me even further from it.
Yeah. Okay.
But I did have a good time.
Yeah, so that's exactly the same with me. I really enjoyed it in the moment, and I was tapping my my foot along, and I was enjoying learning about a figure I wasn't particularly familiar with. And as I say, I think that if you have children or if you're a child, I think that it is a really good film to watch and see the avenues of creativity and collaboration as well. I love the message that it has about community and about teamwork and about the way that those things can basically raise everybody up. So I did really like it. I don't think it would have worked as well if it hadn't been Lego, as much as I have some issues with that format. I think that the Lego really helps tell that story. I overall had a really good time. I laughed, as I said, a bit emotional at times. I thought it was much better than I was expecting, and I learned a lot.
So Reuben, what was your best film of the week?
Yeah, so I think my pick this week is Bird. I mean, I absolutely was
no surprises.
Enraptured by it. So that's definitely what I would recommend if you're heading out to the cinema. But at the same time, I would say, listen, it's quite a hard watch, so don't feel that you have to. Watch what's right for you.
Yeah, I would equally agree. In our conversation, I had to sit with the film for a while, but I ended feeling really hopeful.
Yeah,
I think that's what I really enjoyed about the film. Bird is my top of the week as well. But for family viewers, I'd suggest Paddington 3, obviously. It's a good family ride, but Bird's definitely my top. It is heavy, but if you want to, please go see it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But Paddington 2 is also good, and maybe treat yourself to a marmalade sandwich afterwards.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the first ever episode of Cinema Spotlight. We are so happy to have you.
Next week, we will be talking all things Gladiator 2 and Joy.
And we're going to be revisiting some classics like Ridley Scott's original epic Gladiator and the 20th anniversary of Team America World Police.
Until then, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.